Welcome to the Accelerating Operational Performance podcast. I'm Greg Schinkel, President of Unique Training and Development and Frontline Leadership Systems. And this episode, we're featuring two new things that we're launching into the market. One is our Plant Manager Excellence Program, which is available on site for groups of plant managers, or our new public version of the Plant Manager Excellence Program that kicks off in April. The other thing I'll mention is we have a new demonstrated leadership behavior assessment that we're using to measure the behavior change in our training programs. And of course, it all begins with a conversation at our website at uniquedevelopment.com. Now, today's guest, I'm really excited to welcome to the podcast. He's a member of our Unique Training and Development faculty, Ted Bezner. And I want to do him justice, so I'm going to read the intro that we have prepared. Ted Bezner has been a trainer since 2007, and he and I have been working together since 2013 at Unique Training and Development. If you're wondering just how far Ted's reach goes, he really found his way into the training business doing a series of workshops for a global automotive parts supplier, and he led sessions in Canada, the US, Mexico, Brazil, Ireland, the Czech Republic, India, Japan, and China. It sounds like we're at the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, I know. His interest in cross-cultural communication started really early after his family trips to Latin America, and after living a few years in Mexico, he decided to pursue a certification into intercultural studies through UBC and Queen's University. But beyond the cross-cultural piece, Ted also enjoys training other trainers how to engage an audience and create impact, whether they're presenting, facilitating, or teaching, and he's done that for some of our clients as well. And what I appreciate most about Ted is his humility in the classroom. He's often said that no matter the topic, he walks into every session looking to learn something from the participants so that he can pass that wisdom on to the next group. Ted, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and if you want to get in touch with Ted about his different programs, solvetheculturepuzzle.com is the website.
Exactly.
So Ted, and you know, in our class, we talk about not having favorites, right? But I know that our clients, many of them, you're either their favorite instructor or one of their favorite instructors. And I've watched the magic that you do to warm people up in the classroom, and you spend time on that. And we are going to talk about that. But I'm wondering if you don't mind, kind of walk us through what your journey was to this as an actual occupation of being a trainer.
Okay, so after university, got married, hit the job market, had to decide what I was going to do, more school or start earning money, and ended up in pharmaceutical sales, as we've discussed before.
Yeah.
And the world of pharmaceuticals is fabulous, and it's interesting, and you learn a ton.
So he was a drug dealer, everyone. Let's just make that clear and put it on the record. Sense. But yes, okay, so you're in pharma sales, yeah?
You learn a lot, but usually you only learn enough to be convinced you have the disease state that you're learning about.
Yeah.
Which means by the end of your first year, you're convinced, you're suffering from 10 or 12 debilitating diseases. But it was great to be exposed to all sorts of cutting-edge studies and research and medications that were coming out, and you got to interact with medical professionals, and it was very humbling because you realize that a lot of people dedicate at least 40 years to becoming really competent in one area. And that was the positive side about pharmaceuticals. It was really, really interesting, cutting-edge stuff. But, you have to find an occupation that lines up with who you are and what you really like to do. And I always knew that I would teach in some capacity ever since I was a little guy. So actually in a discussion with my wife, she let me know about a possible opportunity in the automotive industry. They needed someone who was bilingual, who could do English and Spanish, someone who was willing to travel around. And I just started focusing my efforts on that. Yeah, and that was way back in 2007.
Yeah, and that was a big project. Yeah, that was a big project that you got into. And I know the reason we got connected initially was because we had won this very big contract, and it was becoming clear that I couldn't do everything myself, even though I was trying. And I still remember this time you and I were in the classroom together, and you were teaching our content, and I was thinking at the back saying, this guy is teaching the content better than I would teach it, and I could be at home getting a check while he's delivering it. And that became actually the start. Really, it was the start of our business model. And what I've noticed, and again, Ted does teach for us in English and Spanish. He does our Frontline Leadership program and all the spin-off topics from that. He also does some work for our clients where they do have a multinational operation. He has taught for our clients in Spanish in Mexico, does a lot of teaching from our virtual training studio here, and does some on-site sessions as well. And then has done this instructor training for our clients too, where they want to get their internal presenters to be more effective. You do get consistently really good feedback from our clients.
Thank you.
What do you think helped you get better at teaching over time?
Well, I would first and foremost, I would say reading the room. Sometimes being an external trainer helps when people view you as someone who's not from the community that they're working in. And other times it works against you because they assume that you don't know the ins and outs of their business. And both of those things can be true simultaneously. So I take an approach of trying to show people that I'm there to learn as much as I can about their business, which means doing a lot of homework and getting briefs beforehand. And usually I like to talk to whoever's there, sometimes nice and early in the morning, 4 or 5, 6 in the morning, depending on the customer, to ask them, how's morale? What are people struggling with? Yeah. And you and I talked about this years ago about getting more formalized around finding out what the customer needs exactly as part of your front end on everything. What are their pain points? Where are they struggling? And then individually tailoring our material to exactly what they need to address. And people, I think, appreciate that because they don't want to feel it's sort of a generic rubber stamped training session. It's just an event. But instead it's something that's been custom designed to try to help them deal with what they have to deal with. And that always helps for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think you've actually missed the secret sauce, even though like all those tactical things make sense. I've just seen you warm up the audience, and you spend, like I learned actually from you, because I'm eager sometimes to jump into the content and start teaching the topic and show everybody how smart I am. But you spend actually a lot of time up front helping the audience warm up. And I've even seen you talk about, you're here to pick up one idea to add to your... Can you just talk about why you spend the time that you do up front to connect with the audience?
Yeah. We've had this discussion before, and it's changed a little bit for me over time. But what I often think is a lot of people who come into a training session, if they're supervisors, frontline leaders, team leaders, managers, whatever their title may be, it might have been 20 years since they've been in a classroom.
Right.
In some cases, it's longer than that.
Sometimes it's their first time in a classroom, yeah.
Well, I mean, since they've left school is what I should say.
Yeah.
So not everyone has a good memory of being in a classroom.
True.
So, and you can usually tell people sometimes want to sit at the back, and I always make a joke, bad behaved kids sit at the back, well, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I always want to let them know that no one's there to judge them, there's no final exam, because what you want to do with adult learners is get them in the learning zone, which is a little bit outside the comfort zone, but you don't want anyone panicking. You don't want anyone freaking out. Yeah. You want to let them know that you're there to give them whatever you can give them that they can apply. But it's not an evaluation. They're not there for punitive reasons.
Yeah.
And what do people really remember? I always remind them this at the beginning. Adults don't always remember facts and figures, especially when they've got so many things they're juggling, all these other responsibilities they have. Because let's face it, everyone's got a lot to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do they remember? They remember a good story well told. They remember something they debate. They remember something that they laugh at. And I let them know that at the beginning. And I also let them know usually the answer to any question is in the room. If you're going through something, you're struggling, you're not sure how to handle a particular challenge, throw the question out, because guaranteed there's someone in the room who's been in the exact same situation and they will help you out with it. So we also make sure we always put them in small groups, because not everyone wants to talk in a large group setting. So let them know that it's a place where if they got questions, there's 2 or 3 other people at their table. They can get the conversation going. A lot of group work. I never assume that anyone wants to listen to me talk for 8 hours. That's the number one thing to keep in mind, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the neat thing, and I think people will get that just from this episode, especially if they're watching the video as well, is that Ted does this even in the virtual studio where he can connect with the audience across the screen, and does it probably one of the best I've ever seen. Now, like a lot of our instructors who are part of our unique training and development or frontline leadership family, you also have your own source of expertise outside of that. And I know you do workshops. Can you talk about, I guess it was in your intro, but what was your focus around cross-cultural communications, and why is that important out there when you've done work with client organizations?
So there's a difference between diversity training and cross-cultural communication. That's the first thing I'll say. I don't do diversity training, I do cross-cultural, which is basically the idea that we have to recognize there are differences between cultures. So if you're working in a multinational, let's say, and you're expanding into Latin America, or you're expanding into Chinese Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, or mainland China, there's differences in how people interact with their boss, for example. There's differences in how bosses will interact with their employees. There's differences between what the word yes and no mean. There's differences in how a contract is held up and what legal procedures happen if someone's in breach of a contract. And I don't give legal advice because that's outside my wheelhouse. But what I do try to talk to people about is the fact that just because we were raised a certain way to say this is appropriate and this is inappropriate, those rules don't necessarily port over to other countries. And the more you know before you expand to another country, and it's always simple interpersonal ideas, the more you know about that, the fewer frustrations you're going to have. Not that you can eliminate all frustrations, but if you could eliminate half of them, that would be a worthwhile investment up front. So that's what cross-cultural communication is really all about. And that doesn't just happen internationally. It happens within countries when companies are moving into that country or you're expanding outside. So it's slowly becoming more recognized as a thing that maybe needs a little bit more attention or a little bit more investment. And it's basically, it all comes down to, if I can just bridge this over to another thing, one of the exercises that Greg came up with years ago was asking everyone to think about the best boss you've ever had, the best leader, regardless of title. What made him or her so effective and such a great leader? And you ask people to brainstorm, write down 6 or 7 things. What made your best boss your best boss? And I always love doing this exercise because once people have done it individually, we form them into groups of 4 or 5. And I say, make a master list, 15, 20 things. And then we take that up and I do a master list out of that. Usually you end up with a total of about 15 things because there's some repetition.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is everything that everyone states, and I'm going to say 95% of the time, about what made their best boss, and I know you know this, is they're all interpersonal skills.
Yeah.
No one ever lists technical skills about what made your best boss. It always comes down to the interpersonal side of things. And what's interesting to me, and the connection I try to make whenever I do cross-cultural, is cross-cultural communication is definitely on the interpersonal side of things. So to me, it fits into the tool shed, or it fits into the collection of skill sets you might need to be an effective leader whenever you're working across cultures.
Right.
It's another interpersonal skill.
Yeah, and Ted's working on a project with one of our clients where we've done a lot of frontline leadership training, and they were opening a new manufacturing facility in Mexico, and wisely they identified ahead of time that there would be some friction points potentially on how their predominantly U.S.-based operations would interact with this new Mexico facility. And this client is also owned by a Korean company, and so they're also identifying that there's some ways to make that interaction better. So knowing that you teach our Frontline Leadership program in English and in Spanish, I'm wondering what you've noticed is either similarities or differences in teaching those classes in Mexico. Even if it's virtual, just teaching it in Spanish, what are the differences?
Yeah, so one of the things I had to quickly adapt to when doing it virtually or actually live sessions with Mexico is that the more group work you can do in Latin America, the better. And there's this cultural value of interaction that a lot of Latin American countries really demonstrate in the workplace, which is they'd rather work together as a group and throw ideas back and forth and brainstorm and then stand up and present. So I just treat it as a teach back. Instead of listening to me jaw on and on for a little while, sometimes I'll start with a fairly vague question like, why would X happen? Or what do you think causes Y to ever happen between leader and employee? And if I get a good kind of spark up in responses, I think, okay, here's something that we can turn into a group exercise. I'll give them a bit of a challenge and a bit of a time crunch, and I'll say, in groups of 4 or 5 people, here's what I need you to do. List the following reasons why this might happen. List the following strategies to avoid that being a problem, or if it does happen, how do you navigate it? And then present back and teach back. For a couple of reasons. One, in Latin America, specifically in northern Mexico, that group dynamic really helps spark up energy. And number 2, the best way for an adult to learn anything, we both know this, is to make them teach it.
Yeah.
So pushing people a little bit out of their comfort zone to stand up and teach always surprises me how well people take it and run with it.
Yeah.
And then usually by the end of the day, they're saying, "What, are we already
Yeah.
done?" That's exactly
Yeah.
what you want to hear. If they're clock watching, you might be talking too much. But if they think we're out of time, we need more time. Good.
Yeah.
That's exactly. Hopefully they're nicely engaged and they're looking forward to the next day.
The one thing I'll share with the audience, again, we're talking with Ted Bezner, who's one of our instructors at Unique Training and Development. He also has his own business that focuses on cross-cultural communications, and that's solvetheculturepuzzle.com. Ted, you have a very eclectic, I guess, diverse interest set. Like, you're a musician. You are probably a rare Canadian in that you're interested in guns, even though, there's not a lot of easy ways to do that. But what I've noticed is that, and you studied history, and you're just interested in a lot of things. I found it allows you to connect with the audience in so many different ways and hooks. And again, I feel like when I watch Ted teach compared to when I do it, I like, this guy's a master at making connections to people.
Too nice.
What is that? Yeah, what is that? What caused you to have this diversity and interests into music and other things?
I don't know if there's an easy answer for that. Greg called me a musician, but I can't read or write music, so I'll
You play
reject
by
that
ear,
title.
I guess,
I what's the word? I woodshed in the basement.
Okay.
That's all. I have a great time, and my kids are picking up guitars and keyboards, which is
But
wonderful.
you play the drums and you play the guitar. I don't know. Do you also play keyboard or no?
I'm learning.
Okay.
I'm taking piano lessons.
Okay.
I'm the tallest person there. That's all. That's all I'll say. When all the kids line up, I feel like a bit of an imposter. No, people coming back to that earlier point.
Yeah.
People want to know that you're a real individual,
Right.
who's there because you've shared some experiences or some interests.
Yeah.
So I always let people know about what I've done before in terms of work, like being on the floor in automotive or working in different facilities. And you and I have had so many different customers, a lot of whom were in the U.S., that you get a feel for people's challenges, and you know that they're different culturally, and they might be different geographically, depending on where you are. But it's always good to make a connection with people, for them to not put you in the category of talking head or stuffed shirt or someone who doesn't know our world. At the end of the day, what do you really want to help people do, right? You want to help them face and solve the problems that they run into as frontline leaders. And like the point, I don't want to ring this bell too frequently, but I think it's super important. At the end of the day, what are they doing? They're trying to deal with interpersonal issues.
Right.
So for you to kind of model interpersonal, being comfortable, meeting people where they're at, trying to
Building
understand.
rapport.
Building rapport. Super important for them to listen. You have to listen to them if you want to expect, or if you're going to expect them to listen to you.
Right on. So one of the things that, because you've taught the Frontline Leadership Program and seen it evolve over the years, and again, the Frontline Leadership Program can be as much as 3 days of content. Mm-hmm. I know we have a number of clients that do sort of 2-day versions of it. Some do 1-day versions of it. But when you think of the lessons that resonate the most with people from the Frontline Leadership Program, what comes to mind?
So the one we were just discussing about what made your best boss, I find we come back to that. You kind of use it as an anchor point, because we do it in the first hour and a half, right? First few pages.
Yeah.
You keep coming back to that and asking to think, okay, now we were just talking about what made your best boss. How do you compare? I think that was an exercise you added, I remember a few years ago, which is great. How do you compare to your best boss? Why? Where do you have to get better? Yeah. But also, there's nothing wrong with talking about people's worst leadership experiences. So a boss that was really difficult for you, what made him or her so difficult? And asking them to constantly keep those two ideas in mind. Because people need to put themselves sort of on I don't want to be too formal, not a developmental path.
Right.
But like, where do I stand up compared to the boss I wanted to be and the boss I don't want to be? So what I find, a lot of people relate to the idea, if they're parents, of the relationship between themselves as parents and their kids compared to their relationship they had with their parents. Yeah. And I often ask people, are you a better parent than your parents were? Mm. And they don't expect to run into that usually in a leadership course. But, I'll ask you, what percentage of people do you think say, I'm better?
And do you mean on the leadership side or better parents?
No, as parents, yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's higher than half.
No, it's about 80%.
Is it? So 80% say that they're better than their parents?
And half of those vehemently say, oh, I'm way better.
Okay.
So I always say, okay, why?
Yeah.
And that's when they do a bit of soul searching. And I always say, we've talked about this
Probably
many
more
times,
the
but-
involvement piece in
Well, it
their
is.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
As
I saw-
opposed to go out the door and come back when it's dark. And
Yeah, I saw that question
yeah,
online the other day.
yeah.
In the 80s, I think people were talking about Stranger Things.
Yeah.
In the 80s, did kids really roam free?
Yeah.
Yeah, the answer was neglect. 12 hours later, I'll see you when I see you.
Yeah, or I can remember that my mom might have come to the odd school concert, but I don't think my dad ever came. And so these days when the parents are so involved in all the recitals and the soccer practice, and so what you're saying is that the nurturing that comes with that, and a lot of people worry that it made people softer, but yeah, I don't know, the pros and cons.
Well, maybe it makes us a little bit softer. But when I look at my kids and how they're growing up, not to go too far off track, but I always say that my kids' generation is a lot like ours, but better.
Yeah.
There's a lot more understanding. There's a lot fewer fights, a lot less conflict, and they seem to enjoy themselves an awful lot.
Yeah.
And they seem to get along with kids who have similar interests, but also varied interests. So anyways, to bring it back to that, making points, I always say for adult learners, you want to teach through metaphor.
Yeah.
So if you just stick to the content all the time, that can get a little bit drier than saying, let's talk about something outside of work and link it to work. Because people remember those metaphors. And it gets them outside of thinking about where they spend, 40, 50, 60 hours a week, to thinking about experiences they've had in life and reflecting on a little bit and saying, okay, what am I doing? For example, when we do our tower build exercise, which is one of the most popular ones, and we ask people in a certain amount of time, they're going to get a leader who may act out a certain leadership style. You always ask people to think about the fact, the same way you may repeat things you swore you'd never repeat that your parents used to say, if you're a parent. Have you ever repeated something under pressure that your boss used to say that you wish you hadn't said?
Yeah.
And if so, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
And I try to link it back to being awake and conscious as a leader and not just falling into the same old trap of having the same old answers ready. When my son worked as a summer camp counselor just at the Y day camp, he came home one day smiling. I said, what happened? And he said, I've used every one of your expressions you've ever used with me, with these kids. And I said, uh-oh. And obviously he had them loaded in the chamber and ready to go, which is funny because at the time I think he was 15 or 16. But he said he was just parroting all the phrases. Like when I'm trying to get everyone in the truck, let's go, he would use the same phrases that I use. Not that that's necessarily a good thing.
But probably was a good thing. The one story I wouldn't mind you sharing is that, or not story, but use this example. I think it's around giving feedback, or it's about building relationships. And you talk about, maybe you've had some harsh words with your kids and you're putting them to bed at night. Can you just kind of relay that story and remind people of what the context is for that story?
Yeah, we were talking, or as we do talk in this course, we talk an awful lot about how you relate to people and the relationship that you have. And one of the things I like to do, as Greg mentioned, is ask those who are parents, when's the last time, if you got a little one at home, have you ever had a day where you're just short-tempered and you're not at your best, and maybe you're snapping at the kids a little bit, and at the end of the day, you're tucking them into bed, you get hit with that wave of guilt because you weren't parent numero uno that day, and you ask your kids if they'll forgive you, ask for an apology, or you make an apology, you say, sorry, I wasn't at my best, I'm sorry I snapped at you. When the kids are 4, 7, 9, what do they say? The minute you say, I'm sorry, what do they say?
It's okay.
They say it's okay. They immediately forgive you. Why? Because they know what your intentions are. And your intentions as a parent, they know that they're number one in your mind, right? Which is why they instantly forgive you. So what I then try to make the point to or connect to is, okay, so as frontline leaders, when we talk about good leaders versus bad leaders, one of the questions you added in, which I thought was great, was when you think about your bad leaders, do you think they knew they weren't very effective?
Yeah.
Because that comes down to, are people consciously bad leaders or unconsciously bad leaders? Because those are two very different things.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be a good leader, you're probably going to have to be very consciously a good leader because it requires so much effort. But the point I make about that, tucking your kid into bed and asking for forgiveness, is that if people know you as a leader, you're out there every shift trying your best and you've got their best interests at heart, when you inevitably screw up, because we all do, they'll forgive you because they know what your intentions are. It's when they doubt your intentions and you screw up, they're probably not going to forgive you.
Yeah, and you do articulate the reason, like when you're giving feedback or even any interactions with your team, if they know that you care, then they're going to give you some latitude.
Exactly.
And because the other point we make is that there is no such thing. Even your good leader is not perfect.
Yeah.
There's always some sort of flaw. And that trust dynamic and that relationship is so important. Is there another lesson from the frontline leadership that you think resonates particularly well when you're teaching it?
There's so many of them, but of course, right now, I'm trying to think of one that pops every time. But one that really works that I always try to bring up when it comes to empowerment, because we do spend a good chunk of time on empowerment and accountability.
Yeah, big topic these days.
Yeah, is again, I like to mention the fact, usually at the beginning of a session, I'll always say to people, if you see me scribbling something down in my trainer's manual, it's because you've said something that really made me think, and I'm going to take it from you and I'm going to spread it around to every other session, because every time I've heard something that really made me think, I've written it down, and then I show them all the Post-it notes in my trainer's manual, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of quotes or ideas that I've heard that I ask people, can I take that from you? I'm going to use it. And they say, sure. And I always say that the check will be in the mail monthly, but no checks have arrived yet. So one of the things I heard that I just loved, and you can take it a bunch of different ways, but we'll see what people make of this, is that good leaders play chess, bad leaders play checkers. So I heard that, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And first it made me laugh, and then it really made me think, so what's the difference between chess and checkers? Well, when you're talking about empowerment and accountability, what you're really talking about is identifying employees who probably need to leave the comfort zone. Because you had that great line, how do you know an employee needs to leave the comfort zone? When they're bored or ignored, they act up or they walk out. So I took that from you and I wrote it down on another Post-it note. So if you can think of a couple of people who are on your team who have been doing the same role for a long time, and they're either acting up or maybe walking out, or they're bored or they're ignored, maybe it's time to empower him or her. What are you really doing when you're empowering someone? You're asking them to leave their comfort zone. You're setting them up for success, but you are asking them to take on a little bit more than they've done before. You're asking them to stretch a little bit outside, and this is how you identify future leaders. But the question is, well, what do you do if you're a frontline leader? How do you know whom to empower and where to push them? And I come back to that quote, good leaders play chess, bad leaders play checkers. What does that mean? Well, if you think about chess and checkers, last time I checked this out, the board is the same, right? So what's the difference between chess and checkers?
The number of pieces, I think, well, I guess there's maybe fewer in checkers, but chess is really about thinking beyond the initial move. It's thinking several moves out, it strikes me. And also that every piece has its own sort of function, right?
Exactly. Every piece has a different
Whereas in
skill
checkers,
set.
they all do the same thing.
Checkers, they all do the same thing. So a bad leader looks at a team and says, well, every one of these people is replaceable and interchangeable, but they're not. Because some people, you don't know what their skill set is until they're put in a position where they can really flourish. And that's one of the most exciting things about having any impact on any team, is seeing someone find a skill set that maybe they didn't even know they had. And they become propelled by this, almost this internal energy. They like doing what they maybe didn't even know they could do. So, you know, you can take or leave that analogy. I think it's a pretty good one. And usually when you see people scribbling something down, even when there's no space for it in the manual, you know they don't want to forget it. And that's one of the ones that people, I find, scribble down a lot. Don't view your team as interchangeable parts. They're not. They've got different skill sets. They've got different orientations. They may or may not be interested in certain I guess you'd call them sub-jobs inside their regular job. But when you find out what they're really interested in, it can unlock a whole bunch of potential.
The one thing I was going to bring up is that after some clients had experienced training that you delivered, they said, hey, we really need to improve the quality of our internal presentations. One big client that's had us back a number of times said, you know, we do these orientation classes for new employees, and we have all these functions, safety and finance and procurement, and it's kind of dry when a lot of internal presenters present information, and they tend to rely a lot on these very dense PowerPoint decks. I'm sure all of our audience can relate to the fact that, you know, you've been in these presentations where it's like 6, 10, 15 slides and the person's just reading it. But the one thing you mentioned is that you trained with a person who helped you become a better trainer. And I noticed that when you do the instructor training, you put them on the hot seat almost right from the beginning of presenting, even teaching the content. So it's a really trial by fire, but learn by doing. And initially that panic sets in, but it's really effective. Can you comment on why you do it that way and what your thinking is for internal presenters?
Sure, yeah. This is something near and dear to my heart. If everyone thinks back in school, you had teachers that really connected with you and made a subject come alive. And frequently when I ask people this, they usually mention subjects that are hard to make super interesting.
Yeah.
Usually it's, I had a calculus teacher or an algebra teacher, but they went above and beyond, and for some reason it resonated with people. That's exciting. People think about school or training. I don't know that they always use the word exciting to describe it.
Yeah.
But it's exciting when it pops and you learn something. So the first thing I always keep in mind is there's two words that are very similar, but they're not exactly the same thing. Message and messenger. If you have a really important message that people need to hear, you've got to be the best messenger possible, or else it falls flat. If you have no message at all, but you're a wonderful messenger, you're kind of like a game show host or a radio DJ, like we always joke around. You don't want to do that either, because then you're just kind of entertaining people, but they're not learning anything. So it's really, really important in my mind, if you have a responsibility to present, facilitate, or train for several hours at a time, or even a quick presentation, you've got to sharpen your game as much as possible so that your message is delivered by the best possible messenger so that it actually lands. This is how humans get better at everything. If someone's got important information, they've got to deliver it in a way where people sit up and take notice. So you were talking about the way we set up the course. Yeah, it's usually a 2-day course depending on the amount of people who we have enrolled. But I just did one out in Edmonton just before Christmas. And it was, in my opinion, really, really effective, because you got to see people move the needle, in some cases 60, 70% improvement in 2 days. And the reason
Which is pretty dramatic.
It is dramatic.
Yeah.
And you can't change someone's personality. Some people will never be comfortable in front of a group, but you can make them a lot less uncomfortable. Yeah. And you can teach them tricks and tools that they can immediately put into practice. So I find that course to be really satisfying to do. I know I geek out. It's the one course where I have to constantly remind myself to shut up and let other people talk.
Because you love it.
I love watching people get better.
And you learned a lot from the gentleman that you, I think, had worked with, and you take a lot of what you learned with him and also his spirit, and you use that to help other people get better as well.
Yeah, I've been lucky that I've had a lot of good mentors over the years, and people who really helped me learn how to train and present in a more effective way. And you kind of develop a sixth sense eventually. You can feel the temperature of the room go up or down, and you can feel when there's a little, just a drop off. And usually it's a quick break, charge up, get people a coffee, and then attack it from a slightly different angle. But the other thing it comes down to is respect, right? You can't ask people to sit for 2 days and then bore them.
Yeah.
You've got to get them involved. You've got to get them participating. And the more an adult actively participates, the more they internalize. Because we're really good at filtering out the majority of the information we hear and saying, okay, not important, not important. I've got to focus on work, home, family. Of course, we all do. Yeah. But I don't want to waste anyone's time. So the more we engage them, the better. The more it helps them, wonderful.
Yeah. So again, we've been talking with Ted Bezner, who's one of our instructors at Unique Training and Development. I think you can see. Well, first, I've learned a lot, Ted, from working with you and watching you do your stuff. And we were a good tag team. In fact, a lot of times we'd be on the road together. We have a lot of road stories together.
A lot of steak dinners.
Exactly. So a lot of car trips, racing to the airport and finding out we went to the wrong place. That was on me. Ted, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate that. Of course, Ted Bezner can be reached at solvetheculturepuzzle.com. And of course, he's available for all the teaching that you heard him talk about here through us at uniquedevelopment.com. So for now, I'll just say we wish you well on your leadership journey. And if we can be an asset or a strength for you on your journey, please have a conversation with us. Until later, go out and lead.